Hi, I'm Jasmine, and yes, my own sister called me too poor for her extravagant party, laughing like it was some joke when she uninvited me in front of her wealthy friends. She treated me like I was some embarrassment she needed to hide away. But what she didn't know was that I had been building my empire silently all these years. They thought they could judge me by my modest appearance. But what if success wasn't always about flaunting what you have? Stick around. Because what happened next didn't just silence a room. It redefined a relationship built on shallow assumptions. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks. That's all the notice I got before the invitation was rescinded. A glossy cream envelope had arrived at my modest downtown apartment with gold embossed lettering announcing the social event of the season, 3 weeks before the event. No personal call, no genuine connection, just the invitation sitting there on my kitchen counter like an afterthought. Victoria had mentioned the party during our mother's birthday dinner last month. A party she planned down to the specialty cocktails and the press coverage that would feature in the society pages. I barely got included in the family photo that night. Now this. I sat on my second-hand couch, the invitation still open on my coffee table, and reached for the small leather notebook tucked inside my drawer. Simple, worn at the edges, filled with numbers and plans that had guided me for years. The last page showed the final payment on my biggest investment yet. I ran, my fingers over the ink, still fresh from yesterday's transaction. Guess I'm still the afterthought, I muttered to myself. Always the embarrassment they need to hide. I stared at the invitation again. My name written in perfect calligraphy, Miss Jasmine Chen, like a token gesture she never expected to honor. I didn't even feel angry. I just stood, carefully, placed the notebook back into the drawer, and went back to work on my laptop. Manhattan still hummed with energy even at 11 at night, the lights from neighboring buildings creating a constellation against my window. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. About the party next weekend. I think it's best if you skip this one. Bradley's investors will be there, and it's really not your scene. You wouldn't feel comfortable. We can do lunch sometime next month. I stared at the message, the words blurring slightly as memories flooded back. Victoria getting a luxury condo at 22, paid for by our parents. Me working 3 jobs to afford college. Her destination wedding that cost more than what most people make in a year. Me building my business from a corner of this very apartment. I was the daughter they barely acknowledged at family gatherings. The one whose career choices were met with tight smiles and quick subject changes. The screen of my phone dimmed, but I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my email and checked the confirmation that had arrived earlier. Everything was set for next Friday. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, though I hadn't planned it that way. The sun was beginning to set when I pulled up the contact in my phone the following evening. 5 rings, then a click. "Mom, do you have a minute to talk?" I asked, settling deeper into my couch. "Jasmine, of course, darling. Is everything all right?" Her voice carried that familiar mixture of distraction and concern. "Victoria uninvited me to her party," I said simply. The silence stretched for a moment before she sighed. "Oh, honey, I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. You know how important these social connections are for Bradley's business. Victoria just wants everything to be perfect." Perfect meaning wealthy. Perfect meaning people who wear designer labels and summer in the Hamptons. Perfect meaning not me, with my sensible clothes and practical lifestyle choices. Has she always been embarrassed by me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Don't be silly," Mom replied too quickly. "She loves you. She just moves in different circles now. You've chosen a different path, and that's fine too." Different. Always. The euphemism for less than in our family. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. "Not really. I just thought you should know I won't be there." Another pause. We'll miss you, sweetheart. I wanted to believe her, but the polite relief in her voice was unmistakable. One less complication for their perfect evening. After hanging up, I walked to my balcony and looked out at the city. 10 years ago, I'd chosen this apartment specifically for this view, not of Central Park or the glamorous Upper East Side, but of the vibrant, striving downtown energy that had always inspired me. Victoria had laughed when she first saw it. Slumming it for the authentic experience? She'd asked, as though my life were some temporary experiment in living beneath our family's standards. She never understood that I wasn't rejecting wealth. I was just building it differently. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus, my business partner. The papers are signed. We're officially sold. Congratulations, Jas. I smiled, letting the weight of those words sink in. 6 years of work, countless all-nighters, a startup built from nothing but determination and vision. And now, a 9-figure exit that no one in my family knew about. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Thank you, I texted back. Let's celebrate next week. Already booked that table at 11 Madison Park, just like we promised ourselves when we were eating ramen and coding until 3 a.m. Some promises were worth keeping. Some secrets were worth holding close until the right moment. The following. Morning. I called the number I'd saved from the email confirmation. Reynolds Luxury Transportation. How may I assist you today? The voice was professional, crisp. This is Jasmine Chen. I'd like to confirm my reservation for next Friday evening. Of course, Ms. Chen. Let me pull that up for you. A pause, the sound of keys clicking. Yes, we have you scheduled for our premium package. The Rolls-Royce Phantom with chauffeur service beginning at 7 p.m. Is that correct? Perfect. And the driver will have the information about the destination? Yes, Ms. Chen. The address on Park Avenue has been noted. Will there be anything else you require for the evening? I thought for a moment. No, that will be all. Thank you. I hung up and opened my closet, pushing aside the practical blazers and sensible dresses that had defined my public image for years. At the back, protected by a garment bag, hung the one extravagance I'd allowed myself when the first major investment in my company paid off. A hand-tailored Ely Saab gown in midnight blue, elegant without being ostentatious. I'd never had an occasion worthy of wearing it. Until now. The week passed in a blur of meetings and paperwork. The acquisition of my tech company had been kept. Deliberately quiet. Part of the agreement with the buyers who wanted to make their own announcement when the time was right. My team had been generously compensated, our vision secured. Only a handful of people knew that I was now worth more than my entire extended family combined. Victoria called twice more. Once to make sure I wasn't upset about the party situation, and once to ask if I could help their housekeeper find a new placement since they were upgrading to a service. She's really good, Jas. I thought maybe she could help you get your place organized. I know you're busy with whatever it is you do on those computers all day. I bit my tongue and promised to pass along any opportunities I heard about. 6 years of building a revolutionary financial technology platform, and to my sister, I still just did something with computers. Friday arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. I spent the morning finalizing the last details of the acquisition. The afternoon at an overdue spa appointment, and by 6 p.m., I was putting the finishing touches on my appearance. The woman in the mirror looked both familiar and strange. The Ely Saab gown fit perfectly, cascading like liquid midnight. My normally practical hair was swept into an elegant updo, and the diamond earrings, my one inheritance from my grandmother, who had always seen me clearly, caught the light with every movement. The overall effect wasn't flashy, but it conveyed a quiet, confident elegance that money alone couldn't buy. At precisely 7 p.m., my phone chimed with a text. Ms. Chen, your car has arrived. I took one last look around my apartment, the place Victoria had once called cute, in a starving artist kind of way, and smiled at the irony. Tomorrow, I would begin looking at penthouses. Tonight was about something else entirely. The elevator descended to the lobby where the doorman's eyes widened slightly as I emerged. Ms. Chen, your car is waiting out front. Shall I escort you? Thank you, Richard. Outside, the gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom sat like a sculpture against the urban backdrop. The chauffeur, impeccably dressed, stood by the rear door. Good. Evening, Ms. Chen. My name is Thomas, and I'll be your driver this evening. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate the punctuality. Of course, ma'am. The address on Park Avenue, correct? I nodded, settling into the sumptuous leather interior as he closed the door with a soft click. The inside of the car smelled of fine leather and subtle cologne, insulated from the city noise outside. As we pulled away from the curb, I felt a momentary flutter of nerves. Not because I was anxious about confrontation, but because I was finally stepping fully into the person I'd become while no one was watching. Thomas navigated through the Friday evening traffic with practiced ease. We should arrive in approximately 20 minutes, Miss Chen. There's champagne in the cooler if you'd like some refreshment before we arrive. I'm fine, thank you. But I do have one request. Anything, ma'am. When we arrive, I'd like you to pull directly to the front entrance, not the side where they might be directing regular cars. He nodded, understanding immediately. As you wish, Ms. Chen. As we drove uptown, I thought about Victoria. We'd grown up in the same house with the same opportunities, but somewhere along the way, she'd decided that worth was measured by how much you displayed rather than what you built. Her husband Bradley came from old money, and together they'd created a life dedicated to impressing people who measured success by your zip code and vacation destinations. I'd chosen a different path, one that prioritized creation over consumption. For years, they'd interpreted my modest lifestyle as failure rather than choice. Victoria had gone from pitying me to actively excluding me as her social climbing intensified. The sister who once shared ice cream with me on summer evenings had become someone who calculated a person's value by their net worth. The irony of course was that by any measure she understood, I had surpassed her. Not that it mattered to me in the ways it would to her. What mattered was being seen, truly seen, for once. The Rolls-Royce turned onto Park Avenue, where the historic buildings stood like sentinels of old wealth. Lights blazed from the windows of Victoria and Bradley's building, and a small crowd of glamorously dressed people filtered through the ornate entrance. A valet stand had been set up, with uniformed attendants directing traffic. We're approaching, Ms. Chen, Thomas announced. I see they're directing cars to the garage entrance on the side street. Front entrance, please, Thomas. With pleasure. Bye. He guided the Phantom directly to the main entrance, ignoring the gestures from the attendants trying to wave us toward the side. As we glided to a stop directly under the awning, I could see the flash of annoyance on the head valet's face, quickly masked when he registered the vehicle. Wait for their approach, I instructed quietly. Thomas nodded, understanding the choreography of the moment. The valet hurried over, his expression shifting from irritation to practiced deference as he took in the Rolls-Royce. He reached for the door handle, but Thomas was already moving, stepping out with elegant precision. One moment, sir, Thomas said smoothly. Allow me. From inside the car, I could see the small gathering of guests pausing to observe the arrival. Among them, standing just inside the glass doors, was Victoria, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips as she registered the vehicle. Thomas opened my door with a flourish, extending his hand to assist me. I emerged into the cool evening air, the midnight blue gown catching the light from the building's entrance. For a brief moment, I stood framed against the Rolls-Royce, allowing the tableau to register with the onlookers. Victoria's face was a study in confusion, her perfectly arched eyebrows drawing together as she tried to process what she was seeing. Beside her, Bradley's expression shifted from dismissive to calculating in an instant. I smiled at Thomas. "Thank you. I'll text when I'm ready to leave." "Very good, Ms. Chen. Enjoy your evening." As I approached the entrance, Victoria stepped forward, her designer dress rustling softly. Her smile was brittle, her eyes darting between my face and the departing Rolls-Royce. "Jasmine, what are you? I thought we agreed this wasn't really your scene." "Did we?" I replied, keeping my voice light. "I must have misunderstood. I wouldn't miss my sister's party for anything." Bradley appeared at her elbow, his entrepreneur's instinct for advantage overriding any social awkwardness. "Jasmine, wonderful to see you. Stunning entrance, by the way." His eyes assessed my appearance with new interest. "That's Elise Saab, isn't it? Fall collection?" Victoria's gaze snapped to my dress, then back to my face. "I don't understand. Where did you—" "Let's not block the entrance," I suggested gently. "I'm sure you have other guests arriving." Bradley took the social cue smoothly, guiding us both inside with a hand at each of our elbows. "Absolutely. Come in, come in. The Mortensons just brought that champagne you love, Victoria." The interior of their penthouse apartment was exactly as I'd expected, tastefully opulent, designed to impress rather than welcome. Crystal chandeliers, art strategically placed to generate conversation, flowers arranged by a professional. A pianist played softly in the corner, providing ambient background for the murmur of privileged conversation. As we moved through the space, I felt the weight of curious glances. Victoria's grip on her champagne flute had tightened, her knuckles white against the crystal. She was recalculating, I could tell, trying to fit this new information into her understanding of her world. "Jasmine." My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. She approached with measured steps, her expression a mixture of surprise and confusion. "We didn't expect you tonight." "Clearly," I replied with a smile, "but I wouldn't miss Victoria's special evening." My father appeared behind her, his businessman's eyes taking in the details Victoria had missed, the quality of the diamonds, at my ears, the confidence in my posture, the implications of my arrival. "You look well," he said carefully. "I am well," I confirmed. "Very well, in fact." A waiter approached with a tray of champagne. I selected a flute with a nod of thanks, using the moment to survey the room. I recognized several faces from business magazines and investment circles. Bradley's crowd, the people Victoria had deemed more appropriate company than her own sister. Victoria finally found her voice again. "That car, was it a service? Or a friend's?" The implication was clear. She couldn't conceive that I might have arranged such transportation myself. I took a sip of champagne before answering. "Neither. Thomas works exclusively for me." Bradley's eyebrows rose slightly. My father's attention sharpened. "Exclusively?" Victoria repeated, her voice higher than normal. "But that's a Rolls-Royce." "Phantom," I supplied helpfully. "Yes, it is." "But how can you possibly afford—" My mother's hand closed around Victoria's wrist in warning, but it was too late. The question hung in the air between us, naked in its assumptions. I smiled. "Not unkindly. The same way anyone affords anything, Victoria. I earned it." A tall man in an impeccably tailored suit approached our small group, his expression curious. "Bradley, aren't you going to introduce me to your lovely guest?" Bradley startled slightly. "Of course, Richard. This is Victoria's sister, Jasmine. Chen Jasmine, Richard Harrington of Harrington Capital." Recognition flashed in Richard's eyes. "Jasmine Chen, of Blue Vault Technologies?" I inclined my head slightly. "The same." He extended his hand with new interest. "I've been following your work for some time. That blockchain solution for transparent banking transfers is revolutionary. We've been hoping to speak with your team. Thank you. We're quite proud of the system. Though as of this morning, we've actually completed an acquisition deal with Meridian Global. Richard's eyebrows shot up. That was your company? The financial press has been speculating about that deal for weeks, rumored to be in the high nine figures. I smiled but didn't confirm the exact amount. The expressions on my family's faces told me I didn't need to. Victoria's champagne flute trembled slightly in her hand. You sold your company? The computer thing you were working on? The financial technology platform that revolutionizes how international banking transfers are verified and secured? Yes, that computer thing. I kept my tone light, but I held her gaze until she looked away. My father cleared his throat. Why didn't you tell us you were negotiating such a significant deal? The question contained multitudes, hurt, confusion, but mostly a businessman's dismay at missing valuable information. You never asked, I replied simply. In fact, I believe the last time we discussed my career, Mom suggested I look into getting a real job with benefits. My mother at least had the grace to look embarrassed. We just worried about your security, living in that tiny apartment, working all hours on something we didn't understand. I know, I said, and I meant it. They hadn't been cruel, just oblivious, trapped in their understanding of success as something visible and immediate rather than built over time. Richard Harrington was still watching this family drama unfold with the keen interest of someone who understood exactly what was happening. Well, their loss is the financial world's gain. That algorithm your team developed is going to change how we think about secure transactions. He turned to Bradley. You never mentioned your sister-in-law was a tech wunderkind. Bradley forced a laugh. Family gatherings don't tend to revolve around shop talk. Or around me, I added pleasantly. Victoria finally found her voice again. So you're wealthy now? Actually wealthy? The naked surprise in her voice should have hurt, but instead I found it almost amusing. I was wealthy in ways that mattered before Victoria. But yes, in the way you measure such things, I am now actually wealthy. I didn't mention the exact figure. I didn't need to flaunt the numbers to make my point. The Rolls-Royce had done that for me. Richard Harrington excused himself after extracting a promise that I would contact him about some consulting possibilities. As he walked away, my father stepped closer, lowering his voice. Why the secrecy? Jasmine? We could have helped, made introductions. I studied him for a moment. Would you have believed in what I was building, Dad? Really believed? Not just humored me? His silence was answer enough. Victoria was still staring at me like I'd suddenly transformed into someone she'd never seen before. In some ways, perhaps I had. So, all this time, when we thought you were struggling, I wasn't struggling. I was building. There's a difference. But your apartment, your clothes, were choices, not limitations. I reinvested in my company instead of my closet. I smoothed a hand over the Ely sob gown. Though I do make exceptions for special occasions. Around us, the party continued, but our small family grouping had become an island of tension, in the sea of social pleasantries. Bradley, ever the pragmatist, was already recalculating his relationship with me, seeing potential advantages where before there had only been Victoria's embarrassing sister. My mother touched my arm gently. I wish we'd understood what you were doing, sweetheart. I wish you'd tried, I replied, not unkindly. But tonight isn't about that. Tonight is about celebrating Victoria's. What was it? The social event of the season? Victoria flinched slightly at having her own words echoed back to her. Jasmine, about the invitation. I just thought that I wouldn't fit in with all these important people. I finished for her. That I might embarrass you with my modest lifestyle? Or was it that you simply didn't want me here? She had no answer that wouldn't reveal more than she wanted to admit. I sipped my champagne, surveying the room again. It's a lovely party, Victoria. You've always had an eye for creating beautiful settings. It was true, and acknowledging it took some of the sting out of the moment. She blinked, caught off guard by the genuine compliment. Thank you. A soft chime sounded, signaling dinner. Guests began moving toward the dining area, where I could see place cards arranged on elegantly set tables. I should check with the caterers, Victoria said, clearly relieved to have an excuse to step away from our uncomfortable tableau. Of course, I replied. Oh, and Victoria? Don't worry about finding me a seat. I'm not staying for dinner. She paused, confusion crossing her features again. But you just arrived. I didn't come for the party. I came to be seen. The honesty hung between us, simple and undeniable. And now I have been. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by something that looked almost like shame. Jasmine, It's all right, I said and meant it. We've both made our choices. Mine just turned out differently than you expected. I handed my champagne flute to a passing server and retrieved my clutch. Give my regrets to your guests. I have an early meeting tomorrow with my real estate agent. It seems I'm in the market for a new place. You're moving? My mother asked. Uptown, I think, I replied with a small smile. I hear the views are spectacular. I left them standing there, my father calculating lost opportunities, my mother bewildered by the daughter she'd never really seen, and Victoria. Victoria looking like someone who had just realized she'd been measuring the wrong things all along. Outside, the night air felt clean and clarifying after the hothouse atmosphere of the party. I texted Thomas, and within minutes the Rolls-Royce glided back to the entrance. He held the door as I slipped inside. Did you enjoy the event, Ms. Chen? I settled back against the leather seats. It wasn't about enjoyment, Thomas. It was about setting the record straight. And did you accomplish that objective? I thought about Victoria's face as realization dawned, about the years of dismissal and condescension, about the satisfaction of finally being seen clearly. Yes, I said. I believe I did. As the Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the brightly lit windows of the penthouse. There was no need. I wasn't the afterthought anymore. I wasn't the embarrassment. I was simply Jasmine Chen, finally recognized not for what I appeared to be, but for who I had become while no one was watching. The car turned onto the avenue, carrying me toward a future that had always been of my own making. Success didn't need an audience to be real, but sometimes, just sometimes, it was satisfying to pull back the curtain and let the truth speak for itself. The morning after Victoria's party, I woke to a different kind of silence in my apartment. Not the hollow quiet of being overlooked, but the calm certainty of standing in my truth. My phone displayed 12 missed calls, 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, 6 from Victoria, and 1 from Bradley. I set it aside without returning any of them. Let them sit with their revelations a little longer. I made coffee and carried it to my small balcony, watching the city wake up. The financial news alert flashed across my screen. Meridian Global acquires Blue Vault Technologies in $780 million deal. Below it, a photo of me shaking hands with Meridian's CEO from yesterday's private signing. The story was out now. No more secrets, no more assumptions. The wealth itself wasn't what brought me satisfaction. It was what it represented. Years of vision when others saw limitations, of persistence when doors closed, of building something meaningful while being dismissed as insignificant. My doorbell rang at precisely 9 o'clock. Through the peephole, I saw Victoria standing in the hallway, shifting her weight from one designer heel to the other. She'd never visited my apartment without at least a week's notice before. I opened the door without greeting. "Can I come in?" she asked, her usual confidence noticeably dimmed. I stepped aside. Victoria entered, her eyes cataloging my modest space with new awareness. The secondhand furniture now looked intentional rather than necessary. The minimal decor seemed chosen rather than lacking. "Would you like coffee?" I offered, closing the door behind her. "Please," she said, setting her handbag on the counter with careful precision. I poured her a cup, noting how out of place. She looked in my kitchen, like an exotic bird that had accidentally flown into the wrong habitat. She accepted the mug without meeting my eyes. "I couldn't sleep last night," she finally said. "The party went late?" I asked, though I knew that wasn't what she meant. "No." She traced the rim of the mug with her fingertip. "I kept thinking about what you said, about being seen." I leaned against the counter, waiting. Victoria had always filled silences with words, uncomfortable with the space between thoughts. "Was I really that terrible?" she asked, finally looking up. "Did I make you feel like you didn't matter?" The question hung between us, honest in a way we hadn't been with each other in years. I considered softening the truth, then decided against it. "Yes," I said simply. "You did." She flinched slightly but didn't look away. "I thought I was helping, protecting you from situations where you might feel out of place." "You weren't protecting me, Victoria. You were protecting your image of yourself." I kept my voice gentle, despite the weight of the words. "You decided who I was and what I was capable of without ever really asking." She nodded slowly, absorbing this. "And now you're worth more than our entire family combined." "That's not why I did it." "I know." She sighed, setting down her coffee. "That's what makes it worse, somehow. You weren't trying to prove anything. You were just being you." Through the window, morning sunlight cast long shadows across my living room floor. In that light, Victoria looked suddenly vulnerable, the carefully constructed facade of perfection showing its seams. "Mom and Dad are in shock," she continued. "Dad keeps saying he could have introduced you to his network years ago. Mom is going through photo albums, pointing out every time you tried to tell us about your work, and we changed the subject." I felt a surprising pang of sympathy. "I didn't come to your party to punish you, Victoria." "Then why did you come?" The question was genuine, her usual defensive edge absent, because I was tired of being invisible, of being the family footnote. I moved to sit across from her at my small dining table. "I spent years watching you measure people's worth by their possessions, their connections, their appearances. And I kept waiting for you to see that there might be other metrics of success." Victoria looked down at her perfectly manicured hands. "I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you." It wasn't just about hurt feelings. It was about dignity, respect. I paused, finding the right words. "When you uninvited me to your party, it wasn't the first slight. It was just the last one I was willing to accept." "And the Rolls Royce? The chauffeur?" I smiled slightly. That was perhaps a bit theatrical, but effective. For the first time that morning, Victoria's lips curved into a small, reluctant smile. "It was quite an entrance. Bradley's investors couldn't stop talking about you after you left." "Richard? Harrington asked for your contact information 3 times. I'm not interested in being a novelty in your social circle, Victoria." "I know." She hesitated, then asked, "What happens now? With your company, with everything?" It was a broad question that contained multitudes. What happened now? With our relationship? With my new status? With the family dynamics that had defined us for decades? "I move forward," I said simply. "I have projects I believe in, causes I want to support. My team is staying on through the transition. They've earned their success." "And us?" Victoria asked quietly. I studied my sister, seeing past the perfect exterior to the insecurity that had always driven her, the need to be seen as successful, enviable at the top of whatever hierarchy she inhabited. That depends on you, I replied honestly. I'm not interested in a relationship based on what I can now provide or who I can introduce you to. If you want us to have a real connection, it has to be about who we are, not what we have. Victoria nodded slowly. I don't know if I know how to do that anymore. Then perhaps that's where we start. My phone chimed with an incoming message, Marcus reminding me about our meeting with the Meridian transition team. Victoria noticed the shift in my attention. You have to go, she stated, not a question. I do. The acquisition announcement has accelerated some timelines. She stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. Bradley wants to have you over for dinner. Just us, no audience this time. I raised an eyebrow. Does he? Victoria had the grace to look embarrassed. He sees opportunities, yes, but he also realizes he never really knew his sister-in-law. That's genuine, at least. I walked her to the door, neither of us quite sure how to end this unusual interaction. At the threshold, Victoria turned, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. I really am proud of you, Jasmine. I know it doesn't erase anything, but I am. The words sounded sincere, if unpracticed. I nodded in acknowledgement, not quite ready to fully embrace the sentiment, but willing to recognize the effort. After she left, I prepared for my day with a new sense of purpose. The revelation at Victoria's party hadn't changed who I was or what I valued. It had simply shifted the lens through which others viewed me. The challenge now was maintaining my own perspective amid their changing perceptions. The Meridian offices occupied 3 floors of a sleek midtown tower, all glass and polished surfaces. As I stepped off the elevator, Cynthia Evans, Meridian's VP of Acquisitions, greeted me with professional warmth. The woman of the hour, she said, extending her hand. The financial press is buzzing this morning. So, I've noticed, I replied, following her through the open workspace where analysts and executives glanced up as we passed. Thought you might enjoy this, Cynthia said, handing me a folded newspaper as we entered the conference room. Page 6. There, in the society section that Victoria religiously monitored, was a photo of me exiting the Rolls-Royce outside her building. The caption read, Tech titan Jasmine Chen makes a surprise appearance at the Whitman Chen soiree. Sources report the reclusive entrepreneur's company sold for nearly $800 yesterday. Reclusive. The word almost made me laugh. I wasn't reclusive. I had simply been invisible to the circles that deemed themselves important enough to document. Marcus arrived, bringing the familiar energy that had sustained our partnership through the lean years. He took the seat beside me, sliding a coffee across the table. Your usual. You might be in the society pages, but I figured you'd still need caffeine. Some things don't change, I agreed, grateful for his grounding presence. The meeting proceeded, efficiently, discussions of integration timelines and transition protocols. Throughout, I noticed a subtle shift in how the Meridian executives addressed me, a new deference that went beyond professional courtesy. My opinions carried more weight now, not because my ideas had changed, but because their perception of me had. When we broke for lunch, Marcus pulled me aside. You've got that look. What look? The one that says you're processing, recalculating. He studied me for a moment. Victoria showed up, didn't she? I nodded. This morning. And it was complicated. I sighed, trying to articulate the strange mix of vindication and emptiness I felt. For years, I was defined by what I lacked in their eyes. Now suddenly, I'm defined by what I have. Neither feels quite right. Marcus understood in the way only someone who'd witnessed the entire journey could. They're catching up to who you've always been. That takes time. I'm not sure I want to wait around for them to figure it out. So don't, he replied with characteristic directness. Define yourself. You always have before. After the meeting, I declined Cynthia's offer of a car service. Instead, I walked the 20 blocks back downtown, letting the city's energy wash over me. New York had always been a place where reinvention was not just possible, but expected, where the distance between who you were and who you could become was measured in determination more than dollars. As I walked, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a Manhattan area code. Jasmine Chen, I answered. Miss Chen, this is Elaine Woodson from Vanguard magazine. The voice was crisp, professional. I'm reaching out regarding our annual Visionaries issue. We'd like to feature you among this year's transformative business leaders. I paused at a crosswalk, watching the pedestrian signal count down. May I ask why? I'm sorry? Elaine sounded confused by the question. Why now? Blue Vault has been developing our platform for 6 years. We've won innovation awards, changed how secure transactions work across borders. What changed? The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Finally, Elaine cleared her throat. The acquisition has brought your work to wider attention. The money, you mean. I kept my tone matter-of-fact, not accusatory. Well, yes, partly. Success at that level tends to— I understand, I said, cutting her off gently. But I'm not interested in being featured as a sudden discovery. If Vanguard wants to do a piece on financial technology innovation and the future of secure blockchain applications, my team and I would be happy to contribute. But I'm not available for a profile focused on overnight success. There's no such thing. I ended the call as the light changed, continuing my walk downtown. 3 more similar calls came through before I reached my apartment: a podcast, a business network, a women's leadership conference. The narrative was building without my input. Unknown founder strikes gold, emerges from obscurity into sudden prominence. They all missed the point. Nothing about this journey had been sudden. At home, I found another surprise waiting. A handwritten note slipped under my door. I recognized my father's precise penmanship immediately. Jasmine, I've been doing something I should have done years ago, really looking at your work. The innovation, the vision, the execution. I've spent the morning reading every article I could find about Blue Vault's technology. I didn't understand before. I'm trying to now. When you're ready to talk, I'm ready to listen. Dad. I placed the note on my counter, emotions complicated and layered. Part of me appreciated the effort. Another part wondered why it had taken financial validation for him to see value in my work. My doorbell rang again. This time, the peephole revealed Aunt May, my mother's sister, who had always moved in different circles from our immediate family. Where my parents had chased status, Aunt May had pursued meaning, working as a professor, traveling to remote locations for research, living modestly but purposefully. I brought dinner, she announced when I opened the door, holding up a bag that smelled like her famous dumplings. I figured you might need some quiet company today. Unlike my parents or Victoria, Aunt May had always shown genuine interest in my work, asking thoughtful questions even when she didn't fully understand the technical aspects. She had been the one family member who never measured my worth by external markers. Perfect timing, I said, stepping aside to let her in. She moved comfortably through my apartment, setting out containers on the small dining table with familiar efficiency. I saw the news, she said without preamble. Congratulations on the acquisition. The valuation is impressive, but more importantly, your technology will reach more people now. The simple recognition of what actually mattered to me was like a cool drink after a long thirst. Thank you. Victoria called me, Aunt May continued, serving steaming dumplings onto plates. She was quite shaken. Said you arrived at her party in a Rolls Royce with a chauffeur. I couldn't help smiling slightly. I may have made a point. Aunt May's eyes twinkled. Good. Some lessons require dramatic illustration. She passed me a plate. Your mother also called. She's processing a lot of realizations at once. They all are. I took a bite, savoring the familiar flavor. Suddenly, everyone wants to connect, to understand what I've been doing all these years. And how do you feel about that? I considered the question carefully. Validated in some ways, but also wary. I don't want relationships based on what I've achieved rather than who I am. Aunt May nodded. A wise concern. Success is a powerful lens. It can magnify what's already there, but it rarely changes the fundamental nature of relationships. We ate in comfortable silence for a few moments before she spoke again. You know, when your mother and I were growing up, she was always seeking external approval. Our parents' praise, teachers' recognition, peers' admiration. I took a different approach. You focused on what fulfilled you, I said, understanding the parallel she was drawing. Yes, and for years she saw my choices as settling for less. Now, in her 60s, she's beginning to question whether all those symbols of success brought her the happiness she expected. Aunt May looked at me directly. Your sister is her daughter in many ways. But you've always been more like me, driven by something internal rather than external. The observation resonated deeply. I never built Blue Vault to become wealthy. I did it because I believed in creating something meaningful. And that's why the money will never define you, Aunt May said simply. It's a result, not a purpose. After dinner, we sat on my small balcony, watching the city lights emerge as dusk fell. Aunt May told stories of her recent research trip to Indonesia, her passion for her work evident in every description. Her presence was a reminder that there had always been another model of success in my family, one less visible, but perhaps more authentic. When she left, she hugged me tightly. This moment, the attention, the sudden recognition, it will pass, she said. What remains is who you choose to be in the midst of it. Her words stayed with me as I prepared for bed. My phone continued to light up with notifications, emails from journalists, text messages from old classmates suddenly remembering our connection, a particularly tone-deaf invitation from Victoria's friend Sophia, who had once deliberately excluded me from her wedding. I silenced them all, setting my phone aside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, navigating the transition with Meridian, managing the public narrative around the acquisition, deciding which relationships were worth rebuilding and which were better left in the past. The wealth itself wasn't the challenge. The challenge was maintaining my center while the world around me shifted its perception. For years, I had built my identity on creating value rather than displaying it. That wouldn't change simply because others could now see what had always been there. Before sleep, I opened my laptop one last time to check on something that mattered more to me than the acquisition headlines. The beta test of our newest application, a platform designed to make banking accessible to underserved communities, had launched last week in 3 cities. The initial data was promising, account creation rates exceeding projections, user engagement metrics showing sustained interaction, testimonials from users who had previously been excluded from traditional financial services. This was the real legacy I wanted to build, not the numbers in my bank account or the impressed glances at social gatherings, but tangible improvements in people's lives. The acquisition meant this work could scale faster, reach further. That was the true value of what had happened. As I closed my laptop, I thought about the journey ahead. Victoria and my parents would need to relearn who I was beyond their assumptions. I would need to establish new boundaries, decide which opportunities aligned with my values, and navigate a world that suddenly saw me differently. But the core of who I was, the vision, the determination, the values that had guided me when no one was watching, that remained unchanged. Success hadn't created those qualities. It had merely revealed them to eyes that hadn't bothered to look before. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. For tonight, I rested in the knowledge that I had never needed their validation to know my worth. The roles Royce and Chauffeur had made a point, but they weren't the point itself. The point was, and had always been, the journey of becoming exactly who I was meant to be, with or without an audience to witness it. The transition team meeting at Meridian Global's headquarters was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, but I arrived at 8:30, preferring the quiet moments before corporate choreography began. The security guard's eyes widened slightly in recognition as I signed in, a new experience I was still adjusting to. He handed me a visitor badge with an almost reverent care. "Top floor, Ms. Chen. They're expecting you." I thanked him and headed for the elevator, noting how differently people moved around me now. The same person who might have been overlooked a week ago now commanded attention simply by existing in a space. It was a study in human behavior, how perceived value shapes interaction. The executive conference room offered a sweeping view of Manhattan, the early morning sun glinting off neighboring skyscrapers. I stood at the window, taking in the cityscape that had witnessed my journey from struggling entrepreneur to someone whose opinion suddenly carried weight. "Impressive, isn't it?" a voice said behind me. I turned to find Lawrence Kwan, Meridian's CEO, entering with 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to me. "The view or the acquisition?" I asked, accepting the cup. He smiled, joining me at the window. "Both. But I was referring to how quickly perceptions change." He nodded toward the street below. "Yesterday, you could have walked through our lobby unrecognized. Today, every employee knows your face." "An interesting phenomenon," I agreed, "though it says more about them than about me." Lawrence considered this, sipping his coffee. Unlike many executives I'd encountered during the acquisition process, he seemed genuinely interested in substance over performance. "You know, when we first looked at acquiring Blue Vault, what impressed me most wasn't the technology, though that's revolutionary. It was the culture you built." He turned to face me directly. "Companies reflect their founders. Yours values innovation and integrity over flash. That's rare. And worth $780 million, apparently," I said with a slight smile. "Worth more, actually. But your team was surprisingly reasonable in negotiations." Lawrence's expression turned curious. "Most founders in your position would have held out for more." I shrugged. The valuation was fair. My priority was ensuring the technology reached its potential and my team was taken care of. "Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you before the others arrive." Lawrence set his cup down. "I need someone who understands both the technology and the vision to lead our expanded financial technology division. Someone who values substance over appearance." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not interested in a figurehead position, Lawrence." "Good, because I'm not offering one. I'm offering real authority to shape how we integrate and expand Blue Vault's platform." He leaned against the conference table. "Your sister's husband reached out to me yesterday, by the way. Mentioned that your family and suggested a mutually beneficial conversation." The news didn't surprise me. Bradley had always been quick to leverage connections. "I hope you'll judge my capabilities independently of any family associations," I said carefully. Lawrence's laugh was genuine. "Ms. Chen, if I were swayed by social connections, I would have acquired one of your competitors months ago. I'm interested in your mind, not your network." Before I could respond, the conference room began filling with executives and technical leads. Marcus arrived, giving me a subtle nod as he took the seat beside mine. The meeting commenced with the usual corporate formalities, introductions, agenda reviews, strategic alignments. Throughout the 3-hour session, I noticed a distinct pattern. When I spoke, the room quieted. When I questioned an integration timeline, it was immediately reconsidered. When I suggested an alternative approach to merging our authentication, protocols, Technical leads who had initially resisted pivoted to support. It wasn't my ideas that had changed. It was the reception to them. The same suggestions I'd been making for years were suddenly brilliant insights rather than ambitious overreaches. As the meeting concluded, Lawrence asked me to stay behind. Once we were alone, he looked at me expectantly. "Have you considered my offer?" I met his gaze directly. "I have terms. I expected nothing less. The Financial Inclusion Initiative remains a priority. Our team maintains creative control over the technical architecture, and I want Mei Wong promoted to technical director. She's been instrumental in developing our security protocols." Lawrence didn't hesitate. "Done. Anything else?" I thought for a moment. "Yes. I'll need flexibility in my schedule for the next few months. I have some personal matters to address." "Of course." He extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Chief Innovation Officer Chen." As I left Meridian's offices, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Ms. Chen, your property viewing is confirmed for 2 p.m. today. The penthouse on Central Park South. Regards, Eliza Morton, Pinnacle Properties." I had almost forgotten the appointment scheduled before yesterday's revelations. At the time, viewing a multi-million-dollar penthouse had been an aspirational exercise, a glimpse into a future I was working toward. Now it was a practical consideration. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Same person, same achievements, different external perception. I decided to walk the 20 blocks uptown, using the time to process the morning's developments. New York flowed around me, business people rushing between meetings, tourists meandering with upturned faces, service workers keeping the city's complex ecosystem functioning. I was still part of this landscape, still the same person who had walked these streets when Blue Vault was just an idea sketched on coffee shop napkins. My phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Jasmine, are you busy right now?" Her voice had a strained quality I rarely heard. "I'm between meetings. What's up?" A pause, then, "I need your help. Actually, I need your advice." The admission was so unexpected that I stopped walking. "What kind of advice?" "Professional advice." She lowered her voice. "Can we meet somewhere private? Not at my place." Curiosity overrode caution. "I have an appointment at 2 on Central Park South. There's a cafe on the corner of 6th Avenue. I can meet you there at 1. "Thank you," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I'll see you then." I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, selecting a quiet corner table with a view of the entrance. Victoria arrived precisely at 1, her usual impeccable appearance slightly frayed at the edges. Hair pulled back simply rather than styled, minimal, makeup, clothes expensive but understated. She slid into the seat across from me, hands clasped tightly around her handbag. "Thank you for meeting me." "You said you needed advice," I prompted after the waiter had taken our orders. Victoria glanced around as if concerned about being overheard, then leaned forward. "Bradley's in trouble, financial trouble." I kept my expression neutral, waiting for her to continue. "His latest venture capital fund is underperforming, significantly." She swallowed. "He's been covering it up, using new investor money to generate returns for earlier investors. That's called a Ponzi scheme, Victoria. It's fraud." She flinched, but didn't disagree. "He says it's temporary, that the investments will turn around. They won't." I said it gently but firmly. "And every day this continues, the consequences get worse." Victoria's carefully controlled facade cracked further. "He tried to leverage our connection to you, after your appearance at the party, after the acquisition news broke. He called Lawrence Kwan." "I know. You do?" She looked up, startled. "Lawrence mentioned it this morning." "Oh, God." She pressed her fingers to her temples. "Jasmine, I didn't know about any of it. I swear." I believed her. Victoria had always been more concerned with appearances than finances, happy to enjoy the lifestyle Bradley provided without questioning its foundations. "What do you want from me, Victoria? Money to bail him out?" "No." Her response was immediate, almost offended. "I want to know what to do. Legally, ethically. I found the documentation last night. Emails, transfer records. I couldn't sleep, couldn't pretend I didn't see it." She met my eyes directly. "You've built something real, something with integrity. I need that perspective now." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. For years, Victoria had dismissed my career as insignificant. Now she was seeking my counsel on perhaps the most significant crisis of her life. "You need to report it," I said after a moment. "Bradley needs to come forward voluntarily, with legal representation. The consequences will be serious, but less severe than if regulators discover it independently." Victoria's face paled. "There will be charges?" "Almost certainly. And publicity." "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment, processing. I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Not just financial considerations, but social ones. The humiliation of public exposure, the collapse of the carefully constructed image. What about the investors, the people who trusted him? I was surprised by the question. It showed a concern beyond self-preservation. "There will be a recovery process. Not everyone will get everything back, but the sooner this stops, the more can be salvaged." Victoria nodded slowly, then straightened her shoulders. "I need to talk to a lawyer, don't I, before confronting Bradley?" "Yes, I can recommend someone specialized in securities fraud." I reached across the table, covering her clenched hands with mine. "Victoria, this isn't going to be easy. But doing the right thing rarely is." A tear slipped down her cheek, quickly wiped away. "All those years looking down on your modest life, and mine was built on deception." "You didn't?" "No." "I didn't want to know," she corrected. "There's a difference." After finishing our coffee, I walked Victoria to a taxi, providing the contact information for a securities attorney I'd worked with during Blue Vault's early regulatory compliance phase. As the cab pulled away, I realized something had fundamentally shifted between us. For the first time in our adult lives, Victoria had seen me not as her less successful sister, but as someone with wisdom she needed. The property viewing at 2:00 took on a different significance after that conversation. The penthouse was everything the listing promised. 5,000 square feet of architectural perfection, floor-to-ceiling windows framing central park, custom details that whispered of craftsmanship and privilege. As the real estate agent led me through the space, enthusiastically highlighting heated floors and hand-painted ceilings, I found myself considering what success really meant. Victoria and Bradley had chased the appearance of achievement while building their life on an unstable foundation. I had focused on creating genuine value, and the trappings of success had followed. "The current owners are only selling because they're relocating to London," Eliza explained, opening the doors to a terrace with views that stretched across the park. "They're motivated sellers. I think we could negotiate the asking price significantly." "What's the asking price?" $18 million. But as I said, there's room to maneuver. A year ago, such a figure would have seemed abstract, disconnected from my reality. Now it was simply a number to evaluate against value received. "It's a beautiful property," I acknowledged, "but not quite what I'm looking for." Eliza's professional smile faltered slightly. "Oh? What aspects aren't meeting your requirements?" I gestured to the expansive, pristine space. "It's designed to impress visitors, not to be lived in. I want a home, not a showcase." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "I have another property that might interest you. It's not on the market yet, a brownstone in the West Village, completely renovated but with original details preserved. More character, less flash." "That sounds more promising," There's also a foundation space on the ground floor that the current owner uses as an art studio. It could easily be converted to an innovation lab or workshop space. Now she had my attention. I'd like to see it. As we left the penthouse, my phone chimed with a text from Marcus. Meeting with the foundation board confirmed for tomorrow. They're excited about the financial literacy initiative. The message reminded me of another commitment I'd made to myself years ago, that if Blue Vault succeeded, I would create a foundation focused on technological education for underserved communities. The wealth that had suddenly thrust me into visibility could now fuel the vision that had always driven me. The brownstone in the West Village was a revelation. 5 stories of thoughtful renovation, preserving historical elements while incorporating modern functionality. The garden-level space Eliza had mentioned could indeed serve as an innovation lab, with separate street access and ample natural light. But it was the library on the 3rd floor that sealed my decision. Walls of built-in bookshelves, a window, seat overlooking a small garden, warm wooden floors that had clearly held generations of life. "This is it," I said simply. "What's the asking price?" $12 million, but the owner is flexible. She's a tech pioneer herself. Developed some of the early internet protocols. She'd be pleased to know the space would go to someone in the innovation field. The synchronicity felt right. I'd like to make an offer. By the time I left the brownstone, the initial paperwork was already in process. I walked through the village streets feeling a sense of alignment, the external circumstances of my life beginning to reflect the internal journey I'd been on for years. My phone rang again. My father this time. I answered while waiting for a light to change. "Jasmine, are you free for dinner tonight? Your mother and I would like to speak with you." The formal tone suggested this wasn't a casual invitation. "What about?" A pause. "Several things. Victoria called us, quite upset, and we've been doing a lot of thinking since your appearance at the party about our relationship with you." I weighed the request. Part of me wanted to maintain distance, to let them sit longer with the realizations they were having. Another part recognized that growth required engagement. 7 o'clock, I agreed. "But not at your club. Let's meet at Chen's Garden in Chinatown." My father's surprise was audible. "Your grandfather's old restaurant? It's still open?" "Under new management. But yes, the food is still excellent." "All right, Chen's Garden at 7. The choice of venue was deliberate. Chen's Garden had been my grandfather's pride, a small restaurant he'd built after immigrating with almost nothing. My father had distanced himself from those humble beginnings as he climbed the corporate ladder, changing his accent, joining exclusive clubs, marrying into a family with social connections. Bringing them back to where our family story in America began felt important. A reminder of the values that had been lost in the pursuit of status. I spent the remainder of the afternoon in virtual meetings with my foundation planning team, discussing how the acquisition funds could accelerate our educational initiatives. The work grounded me, reconnecting me to the purpose that had always driven my entrepreneurial journey. At 6:45, I arrived at Chen's Garden. The restaurant had been modernized since my childhood visits, but the essence remained: family recipes, prepared with care, a warm atmosphere that welcomed rather than impressed. Mr. Huang, the current owner who had worked for my grandfather decades ago, recognized me immediately. "Little Jasmine," he exclaimed, leading me to a quiet corner table. "Not so little anymore. I read about your success in the Chinese business paper. Your grandfather would be so proud." The simple recognition of my grandfather's potential pride meant more than all the media attention combined. He had been the one who first showed me that true achievement came from creating value, not acquiring status. My parents arrived precisely at 7, looking slightly out of place in their designer clothes. My mother embraced me awkwardly while my father stood back, taking in the restaurant with a complex expression. "It hasn't changed much," he murmured as we sat down. "That's not a bad thing," I replied. Mr. Huang brought tea without being asked, giving my father a respectful nod. Good to see you again, Mr. Chen. It's been many years. My father looked momentarily disoriented, as if confronting a part of himself he had carefully packed away. Yes, too many. After Mr. Huang left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the table. My mother broke it first. Victoria told us about Bradley's situation, she said quietly. She said you gave her advice. Good advice. I nodded, but didn't. Elaborate. We had no idea, my father added, about Bradley's business issues, or about the scale of what you've been building all these years. You never asked, I said simply, without recrimination. About either. My mother had the grace to look ashamed. We thought we knew what success looked like. We thought we were guiding you toward it. By dismissing my choices? By trying to protect you from what we saw as limitations, my father corrected. We were wrong, profoundly wrong. The admission hung between us, significant in its humility. My father had rarely acknowledged errors in judgment, particularly to his children. The truth is, my mother continued, we've been doing a lot of thinking since your appearance at Victoria's party. About what we value, about how we've measured worth, our own and others. And what have you concluded? I asked, genuinely curious. My father gestured around the restaurant. That we may have lost something important along the way. Your grandfather built this place with nothing but determination and a belief in his own abilities. I was so focused on moving beyond it that I forgot to honor what it represented. The conversation paused as Mr. Huang returned to take our orders. My father surprised me by speaking to him in Mandarin, asking about specific dishes my grandfather had been known for. It was a small gesture, but revealing, a reconnection to roots he had distanced himself from in his climb up the social ladder. After Mr. Huang left, my mother reached across the table to touch my hand. We're proud of you, Jasmine. Not because of the money or the acquisition, but because you stayed true to your vision when we couldn't see it. I hope you can forgive our blindness, my father added quietly. I considered their words carefully. Forgiveness isn't the issue. Understanding is. I need to know that you see me now, not just my success, but who I am and what I value. We're trying, my mother said. It's not easy to reconsider beliefs you've held for decades, but we are trying. As we shared dishes family style, another tradition my parents had abandoned in favor of formal dining, I felt a tentative bridge forming. Not a complete reconciliation, but an opening for something more authentic than what had existed before. My father spoke of my grandfather's entrepreneurial spirit, stories I had rarely heard him share. My mother asked thoughtful questions about Blue Vault's technology, making a genuine effort to understand the work that had consumed my passion for years. By the time we finished dinner, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not completely, but meaningfully. They were seeing me through a new lens, not just as their suddenly successful daughter, but as someone whose path held its own wisdom. As we prepared to leave, my father asked, "What's next for you, Jasmine? With the company, with your future?" I'm taking the Chief Innovation Officer position at Meridian, launching an education foundation, and I made an offer on a brownstone in the West Village today. My mother's eyebrows rose. The West Village, not uptown? I smiled slightly. It's where I belong. It has character, community, purpose, just like the work I want to do. My father nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Not about impressing others. No, I agreed. Never about that. Outside the restaurant, as we prepared to part ways, my father embraced me with unexpected emotion. Your grandfather saw something in you even when you were very young, he said quietly. A fire, a determination. He told me once that you would be the one to truly honor our family's legacy. Not with status, but with substance. The words were a gift, a connection to a heritage deeper than social climbing, more meaningful than appearances. As I walked toward the subway later that evening, I reflected on the day's journey, from corporate boardrooms to family revelations, from property viewings to reconnecting with ancestral values. The external trappings of success were shifting into place, but the internal compass that had guided me remained constant. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt May. "How are you navigating the spotlight, niece? Remember who you were in the shadows. That's your true north." I smiled at her perceptiveness. The Rolls-Royce and Chauffeur had made their point at Victoria's party, but they were tools, not identity. The real journey continued, building something meaningful, creating value that transcended appearances, and maintaining integrity when the world suddenly decided you were worth listening to. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, helping Victoria navigate the legal implications of Bradley's actions, integrating my team at Meridian, launching the foundation initiatives. But for tonight, walking through the city streets that had witnessed my struggles and now my success, I felt a deep alignment between who I had always been and who I was becoming. The wealth, the recognition, the opportunities. They were simply new tools for manifesting the vision that had driven me when no one was watching. Success hadn't changed me. It had amplified my ability to create the impact I'd always intended. And in that realization was the most powerful lesson of all. Authentic achievement isn't about being seen by others. It's about staying true to your vision even when no one is looking. The rest, the recognition, the validation, even the Rolls-Royce, those are just footnotes to the real story you're writing with your life. 3 months after the night I arrived at Victoria's party in the Rolls-Royce, I stood in the spacious ground floor of my West Village brownstone, watching contractors install the final components of what would become the Chen Innovation Lab. Floor-to-ceiling windows allowed autumn sunlight to spill across polished concrete floors, illuminating workstations equipped with cutting-edge technology. This space wasn't designed to impress visitors. It was built to create possibilities. "The secure server room is complete," Marcus reported, scrolling through inspection notes on his tablet. "We can start bringing students in next week if you're ready." I nodded, surveying the transformation. What had once been an artist's studio was now becoming the physical home of the Chen Foundation's first initiative, a technology incubator for young people from underserved communities. The program would provide mentorship, resources, and seed funding for innovative ideas that might otherwise never find support. "The first cohort is confirmed?" I asked, moving toward the glass-walled conference room where profiles of our inaugural participants were displayed. All 20, ages 16 to 22, remarkably diverse backgrounds. Marcus stopped beside me, his expression thoughtful. "Some of these kids remind me of you when we started. Brilliant ideas, zero connections, unlimited determination." I smiled at the comparison. "Let's hope they're a bit less stubborn." "Not a chance. Stubbornness is a prerequisite for changing the world." We were interrupted by the arrival of Elaine Woodson, the journalist who had contacted me months ago about Vanguard magazine's Visionaries issue. After declining her initial profile request, I'd countered with an alternative, a feature on technological innovation as a pathway to economic inclusion, highlighting the Foundation's work rather than my personal journey. "Ms. Chen," she greeted, me extending her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview. The space is impressive." "It's functional," I corrected gently. "That's more important than impressive." Elaine smiled, recognizing the distinction. "Fair enough. Shall we begin?" We settled in the conference room, where natural light eliminated the need for artificial illumination. Marcus excused himself, leaving us to the interview that would focus not on wealth or acquisition headlines, but on the future we were working to create. "You've been notably private since the Blue Vault acquisition," Elaine observed, setting up her recording device. Most people in your position would be leveraging the spotlight. I'm not interested in spotlights, I replied. I'm interested in impact. And yet you've committed nearly half of your acquisition proceeds to this foundation. That's a significant statement. I considered her observation. It's not a statement. It's an investment in potential. The greatest resource in any economy is human creativity. But that resource is tragically underutilized when opportunities are limited by circumstance. For the next hour, we discussed the Foundation's mission, the Technology Incubator Program, and the broader vision of creating pathways to innovation for those typically excluded from the tech ecosystem. Elaine's questions were thoughtful, focusing on substance rather than personality, exactly what I'd requested when agreeing to the interview. As we concluded, she asked one final question. There's been considerable speculation about your sudden emergence into public awareness, the Rolls-Royce arrival at your sister's high-profile party, followed by the acquisition announcement. Many see it as a calculated revelation. Was it? The question cut closer to personal narrative than I preferred, but it deserved an honest answer. That moment wasn't about calculation, I said after a pause. It was about recognition, not in the sense of being seen by others, but in the deeper sense of being recognized for who you are rather than who others assume you to be. Elaine nodded slowly. And now that you have that recognition? Now, I'm using it to create recognition for others whose potential is being overlooked. After Elaine departed, I took a moment alone in the space that represented the next chapter of my journey. The brownstone had become both home and headquarters, the upper floors my private residence, this ground level the Foundation's base of operations. The integration felt right, a physical manifestation of the alignment between personal and professional purpose. My phone chimed with a message from Victoria. Court date set for Bradley's hearing. Can we talk tonight? The months following her discovery of Bradley's financial improprieties had been turbulent. True to her word, Victoria had consulted the securities attorney I recommended, then confronted Bradley with the evidence. His initial denial had quickly crumbled when faced with documentation. The voluntary disclosure to regulators had set in, motion a legal process that would likely end with a plea agreement, still serious consequences, but less severe than if the scheme had continued. I texted back, "Come for dinner. 7 p.m. The brownstone's kitchen, warm, functional, designed for actual cooking rather than showcasing, had become a space for important conversations over the past months. Victoria had visited regularly as she navigated the collapse of the life she had carefully constructed. My parents had come to Sunday dinners, gradually reconnecting with aspects of our heritage they had distanced themselves from in their social climbing. At precisely 7, the doorbell rang. Victoria stood on my steps, her appearance a study in evolution. Gone were the obviously designer outfits and carefully calculated accessories. Her style had simplified, still elegant, but less focused on broadcasting status. "I brought dessert," she said, holding up a box from a local bakery. "Nothing fancy, just those sesame balls you mentioned liking." The thoughtful gesture, small but specific, represented the shift in our relationship. Victoria was learning to see me, to actually notice my preferences rather than projecting her assumptions. In the kitchen, I poured tea while Victoria arranged the sesame balls on a plate, moving with a new purposefulness. The charges against Bradley had forced her to develop practical skills she'd previously outsourced, everything from household management to financial literacy. The prosecutor offered a deal, she said without preamble, sitting at the kitchen island. 3 years, with possibility of reduction for cooperation in related cases. I nodded, giving her space to process. He's going to take it. Her voice was steady, resolved. It's the right thing to do, the only thing. How are you feeling about it? Victoria cupped her tea mug, looking into the amber liquid as if seeking answers. Honestly? Relieved. Living with deception was exhausting, even when I didn't know I was doing it. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. The divorce papers were finalized yesterday. This was news. Although their relationship had been strained since the revelations, Victoria had been ambivalent about legally ending the marriage while the case proceeded. That must have been a difficult decision, I said carefully. Necessary, she corrected. I can't rebuild on a foundation that was never solid to begin with. A wry smile touched her lips. Ironic, isn't it? I spent years judging your choices, convinced mine were superior. Now I'm starting over at 37 while you're exactly where you intended to be. It's not a competition, Victoria. No, but it is a lesson. She straightened her shoulders. Which brings me to the other reason I wanted to talk tonight. I've been thinking about what's next for me. I raised an eyebrow, curious. Victoria had been uncharacteristically reflective since Bradley's legal troubles began, questioning priorities. That had previously seemed immutable. I want to do something meaningful, she continued. Something that creates actual value. Like what? I don't know yet. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, a gesture of vulnerability I rarely saw from my perfectly composed sister. But I know I need to learn. To build something real. She hesitated, then asked, would your foundation consider taking on an apprentice? Someone with excellent organizational skills, but a lot to learn about creating genuine impact? The request was unexpected, humbling in its honesty. The sister who had once looked down on my career choices was now asking to learn from me. It would be demanding, I warned, not glamorous. The work requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to listen more than speak. I know. Victoria met my gaze steadily. I'm ready to earn respect rather than expect it. We spent the next hour discussing possibilities. A role managing community partnerships for the incubator program, requiring Victoria to build relationships based on mutual value rather than social leverage. By the time she left, carrying the foundation's orientation materials, something had shifted in her demeanor. A new purposefulness, replacing the carefully curated poise she had always maintained. The following morning, I arrived at Meridian Global for the quarterly board meeting, where I would present the progress of our integrated financial technology division. The reception was markedly different from my early visits. Respectful nods. From security personnel, executives stopping to exchange genuine pleasantries rather than performative greetings. Lawrence Kwan met me outside the boardroom, his expression satisfied. The security protocol integration is 6 weeks ahead of schedule. The team is calling it the Chen method now. Your approach to cross-functional collaboration has transformed our development culture. I smiled at the unexpected nomenclature. It's not my method. It's about creating space for the best ideas to emerge, regardless of who proposes them. Which is precisely why it works. Lawrence gestured toward the boardroom doors. Ready? To show them what authentic innovation looks like? The presentation proceeded smoothly. Technical achievements translated into strategic advantages, measurable improvements in security and accessibility, ambitious but achievable goals for the coming quarter. Throughout, I maintained the same focused approach that had guided me when Blue Vault was an unknown startup working from a shared office space in Brooklyn. As the meeting concluded, board members approached with questions and observations that reflected genuine engagement rather than obligatory interest. The validation was satisfying, but secondary to the knowledge that our work was advancing meaningful change in financial technology. Richard Harrington, the investor who had recognized me at Victoria's party months ago, waited until the others had dispersed before approaching. Impressive work, Ms. Chen. You've maintained the innovative spirit of Blue Vault while successfully integrating with Meridian's infrastructure. No small feat. Thank you. The teams have found productive common ground. He nodded, then shifted to what was clearly his actual purpose. I've been following your foundation's development as well. The incubator concept is particularly intriguing. We're launching the first cohort next week, I confirmed, curious about his interest. I'd like to discuss potential collaboration. Harrington Capital has been developing an initiative to fund underrepresented founders, but we lack the mentorship infrastructure you're building. The proposal was unexpected but aligned with our mission. I'd be interested in exploring that further. Excellent. Perhaps dinner next week? I promise it won't be another social showcase like your sister's party. His smile acknowledged the irony of our first meeting. Just substantive discussion about creating meaningful impact. I agreed to the meeting, recognizing that authentic connections were forming in the wake of my changed public perception, not relationships based on social positioning, but partnerships founded on shared values and complementary capabilities. After leaving Meridian, I made an unscheduled stop at Chen's Garden. The restaurant had become a regular part of my routine again, a connection to heritage that grounded me amid rapid change. Mr. Huang greeted me warmly, leading me to what had become my table in the quiet corner. Your usual, Ms. Chen? Please. And is your nephew working today? I wanted to discuss the apprenticeship program. Mr. Huang nodded enthusiastically. Yes. Liu is very excited about the opportunity. He studies computer science but cannot afford the special programs. That's exactly the gap we're trying to bridge. As I waited for my food, I noticed a familiar figure entering the restaurant. My father, alone and dressed casually in a way I rarely saw him. He spotted me immediately, surprise and pleasure crossing his features. Jasmine, I didn't expect to see you here. Apparently, great minds think alike when it comes to lunch choices, I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. Join me? He settled into the seat with a nod of thanks. I've been coming here regularly since our dinner 3 months ago, reconnecting with memories I had set aside. The admission was significant coming from a man who had spent decades distancing himself from his immigrant beginnings in pursuit of status and acceptance. Good memories? I asked. Clarifying ones. He looked around the restaurant, his expression thoughtful. Your grandfather built this place with nothing but determination and a belief in creating something of value. I spent so many years trying to move beyond it that I forgot to honor what it represented. Mr. Huang arrived with tea, his face lighting up at the sight of my father. Mr. Chen, 2 visits in 1 week. We are honored. After placing his order, my father turned back to me. I saw the announcement about your foundation's first cohort of innovators, 20 young people who might never have had the opportunity to develop their ideas. That's the goal. Potential shouldn't be limited by circumstance. He nodded slowly. Your mother and I have been discussing how we might contribute. Not financially, you have that well covered, but perhaps with experience. She was thinking about mentorship and presentation skills for the young entrepreneurs. The offer was unexpected, revealing a desire to engage meaningfully rather than performatively. That could be valuable. The technical brilliance is there, but communicating complex ideas effectively is a different skill set. One your mother has in abundance, he acknowledged. And I thought perhaps I could offer guidance on navigating traditional business environments. Many doors that should be open remain closed to outsiders without the right. Polish. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, my father, who had spent his career acquiring that polish to gain acceptance, now offering to help others navigate systems designed to exclude them. I think that would be appreciated, I said. Not to change who they are, but to give them tools to be heard. Exactly. He seemed relieved at my understanding. To change the systems, sometimes you need to know how to speak their language. First. As we shared lunch, conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. Not the careful performance of family harmony that had characterized so many meals, but genuine exchange. My father spoke of business experiences with new self-awareness, recognizing patterns of exclusion he had previously accepted as normal. I shared challenges from the foundation's development, appreciating his strategic insights while maintaining my own vision. By the time we finished, something had shifted subtly but significantly. The relationship was rebalancing, not erasing the past, but creating space for a more authentic connection moving forward. "I'm proud of you, Jasmine," he said as we prepared to leave. "Not because of what you've achieved, but because of how you've achieved it. With integrity. With purpose." "Thank you," I replied, recognizing the evolution in his perspective. "That means more than you might realize." Outside the restaurant, before we parted ways, he asked, "Will you be using the Rolls-Royce for the Foundation's launch event next week?" I smiled at the question. "No, that was for a specific moment. This is about the students, not about making an entrance." He nodded, understanding. Sometimes a statement is necessary to be heard, but once you have their attention, substance is what matters. Exactly. As I walked back toward the brownstone, my phone chimed with a message from Aunt May. "Arrived. In New York early. Staying at the hotel near your place. Tea when you're free?" I immediately called her, arranging to meet at a small tea house in the neighborhood. Aunt May had agreed to serve as an advisor to the foundation, her academic expertise in cross-cultural communication, providing valuable perspective for our international expansion plans. The tea house was tucked away on a quiet street, its atmosphere contemplative rather than fashionable. Aunt May was already seated when I arrived, her presence centered and calm amid the city's perpetual motion. "Niece," she greeted me warmly. "You look well, purposeful." "I feel it," I confirmed, settling across from her. "The foundation launches next week. The integration at Meridian is proceeding ahead of schedule, and the brownstone finally feels like home." Aunt May poured tea with practiced movements, the ritual creating space for thoughtful conversation. "And your spirit? How is it navigating this new landscape?" The question was characteristic of her approach, always concerned, with internal alignment more than external achievement. "Clearer," I replied after consideration. "The visibility has its challenges, but it's also removed the energy drain of being perpetually underestimated." She nodded, understanding the subtle toll that misperception exacts. "And your family? Victoria? Your parents?" "Evolving." I described Victoria's request to apprentice at the foundation, my father's lunch visit, the gradual rebalancing of relationships. "They're seeing differently now, not just me, but themselves." "That is perhaps the most valuable outcome of your moment of revelation," Aunt May observed. "Not the recognition you received, but the reflection it prompted in others." We discussed the foundation's plans, the incubator program's potential, the delicate balance of providing opportunity without creating dependency. Throughout, Aunt May's insights grounded the conversation in deeper principles rather than metrics or headlines. As our meeting concluded, she presented me with a small wooden box, simply crafted but beautiful in its precision. A gift to mark new beginnings. Inside lay a jade pendant, its green depths capturing light in a way that seemed almost alive. "It belonged to your great-grandmother," Aunt May explained. "She was also a builder, of family, of community, of possibility. She wore it as a reminder that true wealth flows when we create value for others, not just ourselves." The pendant felt significant in my palm, not as jewelry to display status, but as a connection to heritage, to values that transcended temporary circumstances. "In our family's journey," Aunt May continued, "some have confused the symbols of success with success itself. You have maintained the distinction. This belongs with you now." That evening, I stood on the rooftop terrace of my brownstone, the jade pendant warm against my skin as I looked out over the city lights. The journey from that night at Victoria's party to this moment had been one of external transformation, from overlooked to recognized, from dismissed to respected. But the more meaningful evolution had been internal, not changing who I was, but fully embodying it without apology or explanation. The Rolls-Royce and Chauffeur had made their point, creating a moment of revelation that allowed truth to emerge. But they were never the substance of my achievement, only momentary symbols that opened closed minds. My phone chimed with a message from Marcus. Final equipment installation complete. Innovation lab ready for launch. I smiled at the update, anticipating next week's beginning. 20 young innovators would walk into a space designed to nurture their potential, supported by mentors who recognized their value before the world did. Some would succeed dramatically, others would learn valuable lessons from failure. All would be seen for who they were rather than the circumstances they came from. The true victory wasn't arriving at Victoria's party in a Rolls-Royce. It wasn't even the acquisition that had transformed my financial reality. It was creating alignment between inner purpose and outer expression, building something of genuine value and maintaining integrity throughout the journey. As the city hummed below, I thought about the contrast between appearance and substance, between being seen and being known. Victoria had pursued visibility without foundation and found herself starting over. I had built foundation without visibility and found myself exactly where I intended to be. The moment of revelation, that entrance that had shocked my sister and reframed my family's perception, hadn't changed me. It had simply removed the barrier between who I had always been and how others perceived me. The Rolls-Royce hadn't created my success. It had merely made it impossible to ignore. In the end, that was the most powerful lesson of the journey. Authentic achievement isn't built on others' recognition. It's created through consistent alignment between values and actions, between vision and execution, between who you are and what you build, whether anyone is watching or not. The Chauffeur and Rolls-Royce had served their purpose for one evening, making visible what had always been true. But the real story wasn't about arrival. It was about the path that led there, a path defined not by external validation, but by internal compass, not by appearances, but by impact. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to create value rather than merely display it. The foundation launch, the Meridian integration, Victoria's apprenticeship, my parents' evolving perspective. Each represented not an endpoint, but a continuation, another step in a journey guided by purpose rather than perception. As I turned to go inside, the jade pendant caught the moonlight, its depths seeming to hold generations of wisdom. True, wealth, as my great-grandmother knew, wasn't measured in possessions or positions. It was calculated in possibilities created, in potential unlocked, in value that flowed outward rather than accumulated. The Rolls-Royce had made its statement. Now the real work continued, building something that would outlast any momentary impression, creating impact that would ripple far beyond any single moment of recognition. That was success worth pursuing, not to be seen, but to create genuine change, not to arrive in style, but to leave a legacy of substance, not to impress with appearances, but to transform with truth. In the end, the most powerful statement wasn't made by the Rolls-Royce's arrival. It was made by what happened next, the authentic purpose that continued long after the momentary spotlight faded, creating value that would outlast any fleeting impression. And in that continuing journey lay the true meaning of success, not defined by others' perceptions, but by alignment with your deepest purpose. Not measured in possessions, but in possibilities created. Not displayed for validation, but expressed through impact. The Rolls-Royce had opened eyes for one evening. The vision, values, and verified impact would do the rest, transforming not just how others saw me, but how they saw possibility itself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.